Welcome back to Hannity. Joining us now with reaction to the latest controversy swirling around Robert Mueller's team is the author of the book, Trumped Up: How Criminalization of Political Differences Endangers Democracy, Alan Dershowitz. All right. Good evening, Professor Dershowitz. It's good to have you here tonight. Now, you wrote a fascinating article saying that Trump doesn't need to fire Mueller. And you say that there are certain tactics that can be used that are almost better than actually firing him. Talk to us.
Well, I learned about this from Red Auerbach, the great coach of the Boston Celtics, who told me one day when we were sitting at a Celtics game that whenever he used to scream at an official and yell at the official, he would always get the next call in his favor. Then I heard the same thing from a baseball player who said when he protested a ball or a strike, he would get the next call. I think that's the tactic that's being used here. You continuously attack Mueller. You bring up every possible issue, whether it be conflict of interest, hiring the wrong people, failing to get a warrant for the emails, using the dossier to get the national security warrant. And Mueller, who's so concerned about his integrity and his reputation, may very well be inclined to lean over backwards to show his fairness and to make a close call in favor of Trump rather than against Trump. So I suspect that's probably what's happening. They're playing the refs, as it's called in sports.
Well, you know, aside from the baseball analogies, I mean, you're an attorney. You understand that there are rules, there are guidelines. And we were talking about this in the other block. If you have possession of documents as a lawyer that is privileged, it contains privileged information, then you are ethically obligated to at least notify the person whose information you have. And Mueller's team knows all this. Are they playing by the rules, or are they just hurting themselves here?
Well, they're claiming that they have these thousands of emails, and they haven't even gone through them yet to determine whether any of them are privileged. They're also taking the position that nothing is privileged because everybody was on notice that this was the possession of the government, the property of the government, not the property of individuals. But that violates core notions of civil liberties. People have reasonable expectations of privacy.
Right.
They don't expect that their emails to their lawyer or the emails to the future president of the United States, the president-elect, would be looked into without a subpoena or a search warrant. And it was so easy for Mueller to go and get a search warrant. You used to be a judge. You know, you just go to a judge, make any kind of plausible presentation, you get your search warrant. Why not do it? He's been conducting a very sloppy investigation. When you're going after the president, you can't afford to be sloppy because you know that there are going to be people taking advantage of every mistake you make, and he's made too many.
And you know, Professor, when you talk about, you know, the .gov and no expectation of privacy, this presidential transition team, there are statutes that apply to them in particular, regulations, memos of understanding. So I can get the, you know, you have no expectation of privacy on certain servers.gov. But this is surrounded by particular legislation and regulations and memos of understanding. I mean, it's outrageous. No. I think it's outrageous.
Of course.
Okay.
Well, let me tell you the hypocrisy. You have people on the other side making the following two arguments. Number one, they say that, of course, there can't be any privilege because he wasn't a government official. He wasn't the president yet, so there can't be executive privilege. On the other hand, they say they were public officials for purposes of being able to get the emails. You can't have it both ways. You have to pick a theory, and they're inconsistent.
Well, you have to pick a theory, but, you know, in addition to that, I think what we've seen with Mueller is with this whole thing with Peter Strzok and, you know, the woman with whom he was having the affair, Lisa Page, who worked for the FBI. And they're talking about, you know, they're going to have to get an insurance policy. And, you know, they have this meeting at around the same time. Strzok, who's in charge of counterintelligence, that we start this Russia probe on the alleged Trump-Russia collusion. Mueller doesn't say anything about Strzok and the realization that he found out that there were all of this anti-Trump sentiment. I mean, it's venomous. It's horrible.
But he did get rid of him. On the other hand, he kept that secret. He did it. No. He did it as soon as he found out about it, but he didn't tell the public until months later as a result of a lawsuit brought by a group of lawyers. So, look, I think Mueller is a decent and honorable man who cares deeply about his reputation, is trying to do the right thing. He made a terrible mistake. When you're going after the president who's a Republican, I know, who's a Republican, you take much more care in who you put on the investigative team. You make sure that it's Caesar's wife. Everybody has to be above reproach. He didn't pass the Caesar's wife test. Now he's being careless in obtaining evidence without warrants or subpoenas. Those play right into the hands of the Trump team, and there's just no good reason why a good lawyer should do that.
Well,
I would never allow somebody working for me to do anything like that.
Nobody working for me would do it, but it's bullying. And don't you think it's interesting, though, how the president's team is handling it? You know, they're not really going full bore on this one. I think that the facts speak for themselves. And by the way, you know, you say that he's made one or two errors. I think he made an error right from the get-go. The fact that he applied for the job to be the head of the FBI and didn't get it, the fact that he's so tight with Jim Comey, and as you know, the two of them think they've made history together when John Ashcroft was in the hospital. I mean, that is classic conflict of interest. You know it, Professor. Admit it.
Well, I think that the very idea of appointing a special prosecutor defeated the purpose of any inquiry. We want an open, public inquiry, a bipartisan inquiry to make sure the Russians never intrude on an American election. Instead, what we get is behind closed doors. Grand jury, we're never going to learn anything. Everybody is yelling, lock him up, lock her up. That's not the way to proceed. We shouldn't be criminalizing political differences. We should be gathering information from every side. This was a terrible election. It was an election filled with problems, and we ought to use it as a lesson to avoid problems like this in the future, and the special counsel is the worst way to do it.
Am I hearing you say that even if in all of these open processes, we find that the law is violated, we don't prosecute people?
No, if you use the criminal law last, not first. When you appoint a special counsel, what you're saying is, we know there were crimes committed. Now let's find out what crimes they were. Stalin talking to Lavrenti Beria, and Beria saying, show me the man and I'll find you the crime. Yes. That's not the way America should work. We should first do an investigation, an open-ended, nonpartisan 9/11 type investigation.
Well, then why was Bruce Orr?
Why was
Bruce Orr allowed to go to the Intelligence Committee? We have no idea. He's the guy whose wife worked for Fusion GPS on the anti-Trump dossier, and then he has a meeting with Fusion after they lose the election. And I can only conclude, I mean, that, you know, they're going to try to get their story straight. I mean, that doesn't help either.
Well, we should look into all of these issues to avoid recurrence in the future. We have to clean up our election system, and we shouldn't do it through a special counsel. Somebody before mentioned that Muller should appoint an ethics consultant. I had proposed that in my article this morning. I even named David Souter as one such person. That would help him at least avoid these problems in the future. Look, the Trump people would rather see him have ethical problems because it gives them ammunition. It's in Mueller's interest to clean up his act and go forward smoothly.
It's a little late in the game. I think he's lost all credibility. But, Professor, thanks so much for being with us.